Hey guys, Rollout here, and welcome back to Builder's Block. This week I've got another Bit Beast and a new Transformer. But I mentioned in the last episode that my approach for this series is going to change a little, so let me explain that first. Before, I would build creations every day for a week straight and document them all here at the end of that very week. But it meant that if I needed to make time to record a different video, I'd have to pause doing Builder's Block altogether. With this new approach, if I have another video project I need to work on, like my recent Rosettis videos, for example, I'm going to prioritize those instead of building something. I'll still make a new creation as often as possible and upload it to Patreon as soon as I do, but you'll only see them compiled into Builder's Block once I have enough content to fill an episode. And that might take longer than a week, depending on how much other stuff I have to get done in between. I just need to find a better balance between regular episodes and actually finishing other things as well. With all of that said, before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to talk about this week's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. Skillshare offers thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people on topics including illustration, design, photography, and more. The website is easy to navigate. There are tools that let you engage with lesson plans through hands-on projects and community feedback, and I've yet to find a single Skillshare original that doesn't have an extremely engaging teacher with high standards and production values. It's designed specifically for learning, meaning there are absolutely no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can follow wherever your creativity takes you. I found a class about using Lego in your workplace environment as a team-building tool for creative problem solving, and that interested me. But a class I really enjoyed was Professional Mindset, Productivity for Creatives by Thomas Frank. I've mentioned Thomas Frank before. He's one of my favorite teachers on the platform. This class is all about implementing creative limitations and organizing work habits to allow yourself a more professional mindset. That's something I struggle with personally, so I found the lesson very insightful. The first 1,000 subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare to start their creative journey. This is a limited time offer, so act quick. You've got a lot to learn and nothing to lose, so give it a try, and thanks Skillshare for sponsoring this week's episode. Now, on with the show. So a few weeks ago, I started building Big Purple Turtle, Drasil from Beyblade, and I built his neck and head, and then I took a break for a while. But we're back to business, and I continue building Drasil with his armored shell, with the rest of his body here. And at this point, I was not very satisfied with it. I had a lot of mass here built. I had the outline and kind of the shape, and I had his chest and his shoulder pads more or less decided. The way his arms and legs attached, I was a little unsatisfied with. It was a good start, but there was a lot going on with it that I really, really hated. And at this point, I just needed to set it down, let it go, give it another break, and come back to it later. Here it is from the back. There's a lot of real estate here, so I could attach his additional spikes. There's space at the bottom, so I could attach his tail. At this point, I think the proportions were really bad. His waist was a little bit too far forward. He didn't have enough bulk in his lower body. The way everything came together, the hollowness of his body overall was just really disappointing, and I don't think it looked very good whatsoever. So my morale at this point wasn't too great. This was kind of similar to Dronzer, where at first I had something built that I really didn't like, and I just needed to give it a rest. I needed to set it down, come back to it later, once I felt a little bit better about it. Here it is from the inside. It uses a lot of these new pieces here. They're like a 2x 2x2x2 piece with studs on most sides of it. This piece is extremely useful, and it can actually do a couple of things that no other Lego piece can do, and I have abused the heck out of it with Drasil here. It gets a lot of work done in the structure of his body. I really like that piece, especially at this scale. You can see the majority of his body is actually hollow to allow his head articulation and just to cut down a little bit on his weight. On the next day, I started becoming a little bit happier with the way things looked with his body. I gave it a lot more mass towards the bottom. I aligned his arms and legs. That looked a little bit better. I gave him a tail. I added some spikes and some definition and mass to his back as well. And he's really starting to look a lot more like Drasil at this point. I made a lot of compromises with the tail. One thing I struggled with a lot with Drasil here, despite the fact that he actually doesn't have that much purple. Like, he's got a little bit on his legs, some on his head, and some on his tail. He is mostly black and gray, which is a godsend because, like, it makes building his body and his limbs a lot easier because so many parts come in black and dark gray. But even still, the elements of his design that are purple were kind of difficult to accomplish because they don't make a lot of clips and hinges and things like that in purple. So I had to rely on this connection using these locking ratchet joints combined with traditional clips. And for like the tip of his tail, I had to rely on using the horizontal clips combined with one of those Nexonite shield pieces to give his tail the proper shape with the spikes and the pointed tip. And like, there was just a lot of compromise going on here. And I think it turned out pretty well, all things considered. This tail will be pretty much entirely purple once all is said and done, except for the white spikes, of course. But it comes from a place of complete sacrifice based on parts limitation, unfortunately. And if they made more pieces in purple, I might be able to make a tail that looks a little bit more accurate and is a bit more articulated. But here's what we got. Here's an update on the internals of his body here. Still making great use of that new piece. I actually ran out of them and need to order more in order to finish this guy. He uses that many of them. You can see that the construction of his lower body, specifically in the waist, is still a little bit janky. I was still trying to make ball joints in his hips work. And the dimensions of those mixel sockets are really weird, so I had to kind of build around them in strange ways, and it's gappy and weird, and I don't like it at all. I would change that later, but at this point, that's like still something I'm not quite happy with. But overall, I think the body is coming together a lot better. Structurally, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more chunky and looks pretty good. On the next day, I built his arms, and at this point, he's really starting to look like Drasil. Adding some mass to his body helped, but now that he's got his big, chunky, shield-like claws, he's really starting to look right, and I'm very happy with it. I actually ran out of white claw pieces between Dragoon and this guy, so I'm gonna have to order more of those as well, but I really like the diamond-like details on his arms, and he's actually quite articulate as well. He's got a very similar jointage mechanism in his elbows that Dragoon has. There's actually a lot of similarities between Drasil and Dragoon that I never recognized before. In fact, I didn't realize until recently, actually, that Dragoon and Drasil both have black and gray armor, and Drigger and Dronzer both have gold armor. There's like that sort of symmetry in the team of four there, and it's probably why Max and Tyson are usually paired up, and Ray and Kai are usually paired up. You have like the gold guys, and you have the gray guys or the silver guys. Like there's two distinct groups of two in the overall team of four that I just never picked up on before somehow. So yeah, I really do want Drasil and Dragoon to look good together, if nothing else. I really like these arms, though. They're nice, they're chunky, they're solid, they're blocky, and I'm into all of that. Here he is in kind of a roaring pose. Again, the articulation in his elbows does make him very expressive in a very similar way that Dragoon is, and he's got that extra articulation in his neck, so he can roar like this. And really, that's all he needs. Like, he's not super articulate, but what he has goes a long way. Another thing I changed is he has these additional little spikes on the lower part of his back that I didn't get before. I changed the way his tail attaches, and then I finally fixed his hips. I decided just to attach his legs exactly the same way that I attached his arms, and that's because I planned on making his legs very similarly to his arms. Drasil's arms and legs are quite similar to one another. They're probably built very similarly. The armor looks almost identical, and because of that, I knew that I was going to make his knee joints just as articulate as his elbow joints. And so he didn't really need a whole lot of articulation in his hips because the knees would compensate for that. Here are his legs. You can see I changed the structure of his thigh and, by extension, his upper arm as well. But the leg is built very, very similarly to his lower arm. Obviously, it's a little bit different because he's got toes and he's got this extra little purple heel bit. But other than that, it is very, very similar to his arms. And so here is the overall silhouette of Drasil. And again, I'm very, very happy with it. He's really starting to look like Drasil. I ran out of a lot of pieces in this process, though. There's a lot of parts that I surprisingly just don't have enough of in dark gray, despite it being a very plentiful color. So this guy's gonna take a bricklink or two in order to complete. But overall, quite happy with him. I think he's going to look great alongside Dragoon and Dronzer. And then all I need to do is build Drigger, and I'll have the Blade Breakers done. But Drigger is very different. He's not bipedal. He obviously walks on 4 legs. He's going to be a challenge, I think. The biggest challenge of the 4. That's a little bit intimidating. I haven't started building him, or I haven't continued building him since I built his head a couple of weeks ago. So we're still preparing for that. Here is Drasil in one of his iconic poses, in a pose from one of the Beyblades. And really, like I said, this is all I need him to do. Even though he doesn't have a whole lot going on in his hips, like, it's still good enough. His knees carry him a long way with their double joints. Same for his arms. And this is exactly as expressive as I need him to be. Now that I've got 3 Bit Beasts built, I found it necessary to make the spinning tops, the actual Beyblades, more presentable. So I built little stands for them so that their attack rings could be displayed a little bit more properly, so they look a little bit nicer on the shelf next to their Bit Beast. This looks so much better than just having them sit on the table, and it's a pretty simple affair. It's just a handful of pieces. It uses this windshield element, a couple of slopes, and then some plates at the bottom. This can actually be a little bit more refined. They actually do make 2x2 plates in clear. I have one of them. Obviously, I need 4. I don't know how rare that piece is. It might be pretty old and hard to get. I'm not sure if it's worth investing in because this works just fine. It's a little fragile. It could be a little bit more solid, but I'm not sure if I need the 2x2. I'll look into it. But for right now, like I said, this works. It just kind of holds on to the base of the Beyblade and props it upright. And it's for sure worthwhile because the whole display looks a lot better for it. On this day, I also made a couple of changes to my Berserk Fury. I changed the tail. I got rid of the flex tube because that was basically unnecessary. I switched around the structure of his body, changed the tip of his tail. I changed the structure of his upper leg, so that makes a lot more sense. And then most importantly, I changed how his backpack works, so that is a lot more accurate. Just a lot of very simple changes that I think go a long way to make this guy more solid and more accurate. And here he is. I think he's finally complete. I've said that before, but this feels right. This feels solid. This feels good. I'm happy with Berserk Fury now, especially with his backpack, which is a lot better than it was before. And until they make those triangular silver pieces in his claws in black, I think I'm done with this guy for now. On the next day, I was actually sitting in traffic when I came up with the concept for a new transformer. I pulled up next to this vehicle, and it gave me a big source of inspiration. The idea is that this transformer is a semi-truck with a trailer hauling an excavator or some kind of other construction vehicle. When a semi-truck transports a vehicle like this, it is tethered to the trailer with chains or other tethering equipment. And the idea is that it would split apart in the same way that auxiliary splits apart, using those chains so that everything is still connected, and then it would recombine with the truck into a single robot. I love this concept. I loved it on auxiliary, and I love it here. It just allows you to do some really interesting things with cables or chains like this that you wouldn't otherwise be able to accomplish. And so this is a very similar concept to auxiliary, but I actually think it improves upon the concept in a lot of ways. This is my mock-up for the first day. I knew about the size I wanted the semi-truck to be. I knew how I wanted the trailer to transform, and I knew that I wanted the arms of the robot to be the excavator, so it had to split down the middle. Here are the three components. Again, I just used a 6x4 plate to stand in for the truck at this point, just to get a sense of scale, so I knew how big the whole thing was going to be in the end. Here is the excavator split apart into what would be the arms. This was my initial concept here. And then here is the trailer transformed into a pair of legs. With all of this in mind, with all of this mapped out, on the next day, I fleshed everything out and executed the concept. And here is my next transformer. I think this looks really, really good, and I'm so happy, above all else, that it is a practical Earth vehicle. I've made a few beast transformers for the last numbered installments, and it's nice to have a recognizably accurate looking Earth vehicle, and especially one that looks this good. I love the amount of detail I was able to put into this. Here is the excavator tethered to the back. One thing that's very cool about this transformer is that you can remove the chains and actually have three independent pieces of the vehicle. The truck, the trailer, and the excavator can actually exist on their own. None of them are individual pieces that don't hold their own. They all stay together, which is super, super cool. You can see I was able to get some taillights on both the truck and the trailer. It's got headlights, it's got smokestacks. The excavator has proper articulation. I also love how I was able to do the treads there with those thinner tire pieces. I just think it looks really, really good. On the next day, I made some minor changes. I made some minor changes to the colors of the excavator, particularly the treads. I changed the way the trailer attaches, and I made it so that the trailer actually connects together so it can independently function like this. Again, you remove the chains and you have three independent elements. Of course, it needs the chains to transform without technical parts forming. Of course, like I said with auxiliary, it's sort of assisted parts forming because everything is still connected, but it has to sort of explode first and then reassemble back together. This guy is a lot easier to transform than auxiliary. It just makes a lot more sense. Everything is more blocky. Everything is more practical. It is very much the same concept concept executed in a much better way, in my opinion. And as much as I love Auxiliary, I just think this guy is a better transformer. That said, Auxiliary was extremely novel, and at the time, I hadn't seen anything like that before. Well, now that can of worms is open. The concept had been proven with Auxiliary, and this guy kind of does a very similar thing, so it might come across as a little bit more of a retread there, but I think it's a lot more refined, and again, it's a lot more fun, because it's easier to transform. Auxiliary, to this day, is still a bit of a mess. This guy is definitely less so, and I think overall he's just more functional. I mean, like, look at the articulation on the excavator. I think that is extremely, extremely cool. And again, I think all three of these components are just great looking vehicles. The last thing I did was build a second one. I built a second of each of my transformers so that I can have them on display in both modes, and just to make videos easier so that I have each mode at my fingertips whenever I do comparisons and things like that, so I don't have to transform it every single time. You'll notice in this second iteration where I made a few changes in the color scheme and a few technical changes to the trailer, the excavator actually sits on the bed of the trailer a little bit neater. That's one significant change I made on this day that makes the whole transformer better overall, I think. One thing is that I kind of had the motivation to make this guy colored more interestingly. My recent Transformers, I've been trying really hard to give them diverse color schemes, and I kind of wanted to do the same with this guy. I thought about making the cab dark red. Unfortunately, there's a few pieces in there that do not come in dark red. Really, the only other color that I think would work perfectly, where all of the pieces come in that color, is white. And that would be okay, but I think I just prefer the black. Another idea I had was making it mostly dark red, but also throwing in some like burnt orange and maybe some brown to stand in for the pieces that do not come in dark red, so that it could be sort of like a rusted cab. That's kind of a cool idea. It's just, I don't know if I want to order all of those pieces, put it together, and then not like it in the end. When all is said and done, I think he looks great with the black cab. I think the black looks really, really good. It's just that at this point, every single Transformer I have in yellow, Bumblebee, Leverage, Devastator to a degree, is yellow, black, and gray. And so is this guy. So I have all of these yellow, black, and gray Transformers, and this guy is no different. I find that a little bit annoying, but if it's what works, then it works. And I think that this guy's overall aesthetic is really solid as it is, and I'm not sure if I want to change it just for the sake of diversity. But here he is. He doesn't have a set-in-stone name just yet. I've got a couple of options. Number one on my list is Payloader. Payload is a Transformer, Loader is a Transformer, but technically not Payloader, so I think it's free game. I think it sounds pretty good, and I think it fits his character in robot mode. Another name that I thought of was Tether. I don't think it fits his character quite as well, but I think Tether is just a pretty good Transformer name. If you have a better idea for a name for this guy, for a truck carrying around an excavator, by all means, post a comment. I'll read them all. If I find one that's absolutely genius, I may or may not go with it. If I do go with it, I will definitely shout you out in a Builder's Block episode. If nothing else, it might be fun to read your suggestions and just see what you have to offer. And hey, maybe you'll be able to name my next Transformer. If not, I'll probably go with Payloader and call it a day. But yeah, here is LEGO Transformers number 98. We're getting pretty close to 100. So on a regular week, I'll build something once a day, 6 or 7 creations, and you'll see an episode come out at the end, just like normal. If I get busy with other projects, I might only build a few creations that week, and you'll see a new Builder's Block once I have 6 or 7 days worth of content ready to talk about. Does that make any sense? Anyway, next week I'm actually attending a small private LEGO convention for the first time in a while. Really looking forward to that, and you can look forward to pictures from that in the next episode. Special thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and to all of my Patreon supporters as well, especially the Leader Class patrons Valraven, Beyond the Brick, and Beta. Until next time, this has been Rollout, signing off.